All right. So this week, one of the things that I was interested in is learning about how you move from metaphysical principles to practical application in businesses. So could you please walk me through one or two metaphysical principles or systems of thought and how, let's say, I wanted to own a retail business or start my own retail business, how would those principles influence my behavior?
Okay, so the important place to start with this is to understand that the way that I use metaphysics. And so I believe in signs and symbols and everything. So the way I look at metaphysics, let's just give a basic example here. So something that I came across recently. This, as a matter of fact, we could actually use this exact example for how I go from metaphysical idea to application. So I was watching a video on the orbit of Venus around the planet Earth, right? So Venus orbits around the planet Earth in a way, I believe they said it's a 5 or 8 year cycle. I can't remember it right now because I've been jumbling my mind with so much different shit. But there's a cycle. The way the Venus work, right? Oh, it's five. Yeah, of course. So it's an 8 year cycle that creates a five petal plant, basically. And so this is where we get the idea of Venusian and the phi ratio. And so the reason why Venus is connected to spring is because Venus makes a flower around the planet. And it also, these same flowers deal with spring and the vibration, the phi ratio and balance. And so the phi ratio, if you're a symmetrical being, you're beautiful and your body is shaped in the phi ratio. So like the subconscious perception of beauty is perceived through this phi ratio, which is associated to Venus, which is associated to the goddess of beauty. And so this is how I unpack these concepts, right? And so I took that and I asked, okay, so what are the other planet rotations around the planet and what do they symbolize? And how do we connect the Roman and Greek pantheons that deify these planets to how they're symbolized in society? That took me down a whole rabbit hole.
Can we pause?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I feel like what undergirded all of that is a set of patterns of thinking that I don't. It didn't connect with me. So one of the things you said is, or you made an association between Venus and plants.
Yes, because the Venus, so what they say is the Venus flower is the rotation that the Venus makes around the Earth. It's a it goes around the Earth in a way where it makes a flower. So if you look at the rotation of it and the pattern over 8 years, if you put a line from where it starts at the beginning of that 8 year cycle to the end of it, it would make a five-pointed flower around the planet.
Okay, and then you also brought in phi and symmetry and beauty. Can you
Because
unpack that?
five is
Okay.
related to phi, which is the phi ratio,
You
the
said,
five-pointed star.
oh, like the five pointed star. So the number five is
Yep.
associated with, is, and now are you saying phi, like PHI?
Yes. So people associate the phi ratio with the number five in esoteric circles.
Okay, see, this is stuff that I need to know. I'm not in esoteric circles, so this is new knowledge to me. Okay, so there's association between the number five and like the Greek letter phi, basically.
The phi ratio specifically.
Okay,
So like the idea of like the golden mean, the golden ratio.
okay, and the golden ratio, the phi ratio, is associated with symmetry. Okay, which is associated
So
with
things that
beauty.
so most of the things that you look at in the world, so the golden mean is this like a mathematical equation for how things are formulated in the universe. And so it's pretty much this idea that like like the shells that go in this spiral, that's the phi ratio. Like you can map the phi ratio to the rate at which these flowers grow. The like separation between flower petals is like mapped by the phi ratio. Like they grow things, plants grow in the phi ratio. Animals' bodies and shapes grow into this ratio, and so you can measure the body. See them like people that are symmetric. Like if you put the phi ratio over them, its points will like show the eyes, the ears, like the placements of the human body itself is in the phi ratio. So the idea here is that the universe or God builds within this ratio.
Okay, I think I'm with you now. Please continue.
Okay, and what I did with that is that so if we look at so what I'm doing is I'm identifying archetypes. That's what I'm really getting to here. So the principle here is, how do you identify archetypes, and how many different ways can you identify archetypes? This goes back to our conversation about truth. How does truth exist? Okay, if the planet moves this way, things are built in this way, there has to be some element of truth here. What is identified? And then what you realize is cultures have personified these things once they find them, so they can tell stories about them that explain the concept. This is the whole alchemy thing wrapped in a bubble anyway. The whole idea of sulfur and the different mercury and the different elements that are there, they're representatives of these archetypes from the planets that are there. And so this whole concept unfolds from there. And so what I did is I wanted to make a calendar that plotted based off of these cycles. And after a whole lot of tampering, I ended up just taking the frequency that each planet makes in its cycles and associating it with an element or principle in society or reality. And then I correlated that to making a calendar basically. So this calendar works off the 72 seasons, micro seasons of Japan, Japanese mythology. So like Japanese have these 72 micro seasons where every 5 days the season change, and it represents the small different changes that go on in nature. So associating with nature, that was what I did with there. I brought in the 72 because the number was 72 with the micro seasons. I'm like, oh, okay, so let me bring in the 72 angels, names of God. I don't know how to say the word, but this Shem Hefref, I don't know how to say it. And then the 72 Goetia spirits, which are the demons from the Book of Solomon. And so I balanced this into a three thing. So I built it in threes. So we got the 72 angels, the 72 micro seasons, and the 72 spirits all lined up as a balance sheet. So you have the good and bad of these both sides and how it's expressed in the churning through how the seasons change. That's how I kind of came up with that concept. Should I stop there?
Please, please. Okay, okay. So was the number 72 a part of what prompted you to make those associations, or did someone else already make those associations and you elaborated on them?
Have a book comparing the 72 names of God to the 72 Goetia, trying to create a balance sheet. It was just an idea I had. When I see numbers that match, I'm like, okay, so what else has this number? What can I build with that? How can I balance this? And so the whole idea came from, it started with me finding the 72 Goetia. The 72 Goetia so I wanted to get into Solomon's wisdom. Solomon's wisdom talks about him knowing the names of his demons. And so I went and figured out who the demons were, what the names were. And I was like, okay, this is cool. That's the 72 Goetia. Got that. But I like angels. Why is there no angel version of this? What's the angel mythology? What do you find? Okay, there is an angel version of this. It's called the 72 names of God. It's a Jewish Kabbalist practice where they name the emanations of God and the different names of these beings. It's all in the Bible. It's this whole thing that you can go unpack. I'll give you the actual name of it. It's like SHEM something Hebrew that I don't know how to say. And so what I did was I created a balance sheet. So each one of these demons represented emotion. Each one of these angels represented emotion. How these emotions balance each other out? Which of these are opposite? And I created a spreadsheet in a book. It's a 72 page PowerPoint that I've made that I haven't been able to put out because the file is just too large for me to. It's decorated. I got all. So what I did was I got the actual images for each of the Goetia, and I got the Hebrew name for each god, and I created a PowerPoint with like, it has the images, all the markings for each one, and how they compare the emotions. And I was gonna write in like an excerpt of what that was, and I tabled that because I couldn't get the book to load, and I made this instead. So the
And
calendar balances those over the 72 seasons, gives you a frequency, and it gives you the app actually plays the frequency that the planet makes during that cycle, so that as well. And so that's kind of how I do it. And so the idea here is that, okay, if you want to order your business, let's take it there. If you want to order your business, let's take you off of the Gregorian calendar first, because that's causing you stress because you're trying to keep up with everybody else is doing. Let's give you a separate calendar for your business that focuses on building you up. So what did I do to get on top of what I do to add a layer for the business? I have what I'm producing called the Diamond Protocol, which are the 5 agent system. And what I've done is I've programmed these agents to give you, because it's 5 agents, each agent goes with a day on the 72 cycles. And you go through the first 4 days, and then you review what you built on the fifth day. So every 5 days, you pick a task, You work on the different elements of that task and you review that task, and that's how you build this cycle and habit for your business. And that's what I'm presenting with that element. And that's all came from, why does Venus make a flower around the planet? I don't know how my mind works, but that's the short end of the process. So we can ask questions there and kind of unpack some of the elements, because it's a lot. And it's an app. I can have it in my phone. I can send it to you and you could try it right now.
Yes, let's ask questions now. Okay. I'm sorry. I think my brain is working very slow today. Or, and or, this is just a lot. I'm very new to this. So, um, Venus plant, 5 pointed plant. Every 8 years, it forms. Every 8 years, its rotation around the Earth forms a shape of a 5 pointed plant
Or a
and
star.
or star, and the 5 points, or just the number five, is also associated with phi, the golden mean, the golden ratio, which is also associated with symmetry in humans, or attractiveness and beauty in humans. Okay, now 72, the number 72. How do we make that leap from Venus to 72, which is the 72 micro seasons, the 72 spirits or Goetias, and the 72 angels?
I prompted Gemini for a calendar or a pattern that followed nature revolving these cycles, and it pointed me to that. And that brought up the head bulb. Oh wait, 72. I know something that's 72, and that's where that cycle went. So Gemini, so literally I prompted Gemini. I want to build a calendar based off of what culture has the calendar that follows the natural cycles the best, and it pointed me to the 72 micro seasons of Japanese culture.
Okay, so I understand that your starting point there was natural patterns. Now, how does Venus tie into this?
It comes from the flower aspect. How do I? So if Venus is seen in nature through a flower, what other system has changed? Most has tracked the changes in nature that are connected to these beings. So what? This is what it was. So I went from, okay, I've identified Venus. Venus is the goddess of beauty, and I've identified how Venus is connected to the goddess of beauty. That's what you just went over. So from there, my question was, what other gods are associated to elements in reality that we can identify in this same fashion? That gave me the other gods from Greek mythology and how they're identified based off of their patterns and frequencies. And so the question from there was, is how can I line these up on a calendar in a way that we can understand the different changes that are going on in society? And that brought me to the 72 micro seasons. And mind you, I'm working with AI through this. So I'm giving it these concepts like, hey, what about this and this and this? And what about this and this? I've identified this pattern in reality. And it's giving me back what the internet is saying. And I'm going through these different ideas. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. Oh, well, what about this? What about that? And so this is a conversation that's happening with me and AI. And that's really that's the other factor to it. I'm asking AI to quantify these concepts that I'm getting from esoteric metaphysics.
Part of what it sounds like is happening to me is a whole bunch of conceptual association and systemic association, or systems of thought association. So,
I'm a madman in his lab. I'm Merlin in this shop. That's the idea of a mystic here. So like I'm pulling from the darkness here. I'm not dealing with concrete concepts. I'm taking bits and pieces of things and seeing how they fit together. And I'm patient enough to keep putting things on until I have a complete system. And because of my understanding of metaphysics, I know what a complete system looks like. That's hard to explain though. Like it's really hard for me to, that's the disconnect here. Like there's an I this is what magic is. Like this is to me this is what magic is. Like the idea of how I think, how I structure ideas is something that's hard for me to communicate unless you watch me in the midst of doing it. Because if you watch me work, it's like, what even made you ask that question? And it's like, bro, I don't know. When I'm given certain information, I have certain questions, and I've learned how to ask those questions in a way that progresses the education of and I haven't. And so the idea here is that in metaphysics, as an occultist, as a shaman, as somebody that deals with spirits and things of that nature, there's an intuitive way that you have to move. Like, you have to walk in blind faith. So there's this aspect of your random thoughts aren't so random. And there's a way to train yourself to pay attention to what thoughts are relevant. And so after a couple of years of meditation, some high dose shrooms, and me just learning how to not really give a fuck, I've gotten real good at what ideas can build something somehow. I believe it's something genetic. I believe that I think in a way that allows me to see things. It's a systematic thing. Like, so when I prompt AI about this, it pretty much says is that the way that you think is as a system architect. That's the way it describes my thought patterns. I work as a system architect. Every way that I see things is a system. I compare everything to systems. I compartmentalize everything. I I took my judgmental habit and made it a superpower. I'm real good at judging what a person is and isn't good at, or a thing, or an idea, and figuring out how to place it within the grander scheme of things. And that's the best way I can word that without further prodding.
It makes sense to me. So much of what you said made me think about creativity.
That's why I get that's why I'm so big on creatives.
There are a few ways to measure creativity. One simple way is just to ask people, for example, how many uses can you think of for a brick in 60 seconds? And you get, let's say, 100 people to answer that question. And what you can do is you can plot their answers on a distribution where many people will give the same few answers. But then there are some other people who give answers that are really far out in the distribution. And there's a minority of those people. And another thing you have to do is you get 4 or 5 outside observers and you train them as judges to validate that these are functional uses for a brick. But still, after you do all that, you find that most people give the same set of answers, right? And then there are a few people who just come up with very, very elaborate yet still functional uses for a brick. Another way you can do it is you can ask people to list as many words that you can that start with the letter S in 2 minutes. And again, there's a wide variation in terms of people's ability to answer that question, where within 2 minutes, some people can come up with like 10 and some people come up with 100. And so for you, those two traits of creativity, fluency, and let's say novel utility, it seems like those are both very high in you. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is to extract out the leaps that you make, or from my perspective, what are leaps, but for you, they're obvious or they're self evident. And I think that it's the elucidation of those leaps that can be beneficial for other people in terms of allowing them to train themselves to think like you, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I can actually answer that. So what I've done is I've erased the lines in my mind. I've eliminated separation in my thinking. I believe that everything is a copy of everything else. And so everything goes together if you understand what that thing is portraying itself as. Let me put it this way. Um, Long story short, the law of one. Everything is the same. Like everything works together. So the leaps that I'm making, they come from my ability to think abstractly. Like, what is this thing if I wasn't labeled what it's labeled as? What does it do? Where is it from? How does it work? What can I do with it? I analyze everything like that. Like, even people. Like, what do you know? How capable are you physically, mentally? Like, it's just something I do subconsciously. Like, I constantly study things. So it's like, because I'm constantly studying things, I already have most things categorized at some level. And I don't think the secret is categorizing things or any of that. It's not being, and like, it's also back to my rant on quantum thinking and how it's a necessity for us to continue to move forward, because with AI and with technology, you don't have to really focus on the details as much. You can kind of give abstract ideas more of a shot, and you can work with things in a way that allows them to be fluent. So the, the half steps that I take, let me slow it down. So Venus. So let's take in how I came upon this information. I came upon this information from someone that already mapped out the connection to Venus, to the 5 point star, to the phi ratio. My connection here is connecting Venus to the goddess of beauty and the flower, and then asking the question, how else does this show up? So, matter of fact, let me think back to it. Actually, the video I watched explained the entire Venus archetype. I had that. I came in with that information. My initial question was, okay, if it works for Venus, what else does it work for? So it's not that much of a jump to me. My thing is, okay, that's cool, but there's how many other planets? And every other planet is associated with a god in Roman mythology. So how does that show up there? But that requires someone to already have that preconceived knowledge, that preconditioned knowledge of the pantheon of gods from and connected to planets. You know what I'm saying? Does that kind of make a little bit more clear? Like it's having a. I think the secret is having the knowledge to be able to make the jump. I'll answer it that way. Like you have to have a wide enough array of knowledge to be able to compare the different things.
There's a lot in there. I want to ask some more questions about how you think about it, and maybe it will also become more clear as we move into the practical application in the business domain. But before we get there, I'm very interested in how you think. I'm very interested in it because in my mind, it's creativity, and it's and most people are not creative. Like I said, uh, in my mind, creativity can be broken down into fluency and novel utility. And then creativity is one aspect of what it takes to be a genius. There's this book called Genius written by Hans Isaac, and he said essentially that geniuses are hyper creative, hyper intelligent, and hyper disciplined. So this to me is very interesting. Part of what I heard you just say, I'm going to try to summarize it, is that you have accumulated a wealth of knowledge in terms of particular instances, concepts, images, relationships. And what you are doing is you are abstracting out. And when I think of abstraction, I just think it means to find the patterns, to see what's common across these different sets of knowledge. And as you abstract, let's say across one set of knowledge, you also abstract across another set of knowledge, and then you abstract across these abstractions, and you continue to abstract higher and higher, and what you get eventually is an archetype. It's the universal principle, it's the universal pattern. Is that kind of what you're saying you're doing?
Yes, I've so since I got into metaphysics, I've created a tree of archetypes. I connect every so anytime I see the number 12, 7, 4, 5, 2, 9, 12, you know what I'm saying? Anytime I see a triangle, square, diamond, rectangle, like I've associated certain things, certain colors, like everything has its little compartment, you know? And it's like, so I was a curious child. I was the type of kid, if you said a word around me that I didn't know, not only did I need to know how to spell it, but I wanted to know what it meant. What I realized is most people use words they don't know. And so what I began to do was to try my best to be well educated. My girl would call me a walking encyclopedia. I study everything, everything. My curiosity has no bounds. If I see something and I don't understand it, I don't just go ask what it is. I ask and understand the concept of how it works in reality. And it allows me now, because I've done that for so many years, to like automatically compare, like, oh, if I see Venus, the first thing I think about with Venus is okay, so what culture is talking about Venus? Because we talk about, depending on what culture, it's a god or a planet, or you know what I'm saying? Like, and so that's how I unpack things. And so um I started like, so Dalpazar Imperium World is a website I have. It's literally a category of gods and planets and colors and the tree of life and the Nadi system. And I don't think I've showed you this site yet. Well, I'll show you to you when we get off the call, bro. I'm building a library of what I'm finding at this point. I'm just connecting the dots.
And to some degree, that's what these large language models are, right? Like with English or with language, sorry, and with images, we encode knowledge into these systems of symbols via associations. And so with English, you have, or I guess, I don't know what alphabet is. The alphabet we have, the alphabet we use, there's 26 letters, right? 26. And there are associations between each letters in the English language such that when one letter appears, there's a probability that another letter appears. And those probabilities are different. Yes.
I want to talk to that exact point. This is what got me to unpacking everything. So the concept here is that the letters that we understand were written based off of the constellations that people believed had power. This is like this whole unpacking thing. I can't even tell you where it comes from. Don't ask me. What did I get from that? And so there's this idea, I'm missing my mic. There's this idea here that every letter represents an entity, and that these entities are formulated in words to give off a certain vibration, and that each word has a vibration. This is geometry, this is etymology, this is the study of linguistics itself, understanding the meaning of words. It's believed that you can unpack it beyond just what humans have defined it as, but what those letters and those entities represent. And so when I get to see stuff like that, I'm like, bro, so everything has this subtle value independently of everything else that we use it for. And so how do I begin to collect the understanding of each of these individual pieces? How do I know what every number means? What does every planet mean? What does every color mean? What does every shape mean? What does every habit mean? Oh, if a person does this or that, and for some reason my mind is like, okay, categorize it, lock it down, remember it. It's a pattern. Look at it, see what else is. What other things are red? What other things are blue? How do they act? How do people act when they have these things? It's just a constant study.
So I think I mentioned this last time, but there's this cybernetician slash psychologist named William Ross Ashby, and he loved talking about patterns. And he gave this example to try to understand how cyberneticians thought that I think is missing from a lot of our scientific and intellectual domains. So he's talking back in the 50s, I think. And so imagine the process that it takes to communicate to a community that a storm is coming. So you have the weather station that is monitoring patterns on a radar. Okay? So there's a pattern on the radar. That detector or the human that's there operating it has knowledge that when this radar manifests a certain pattern, that indicates that a storm is coming. So what happens, right? The pattern from the radar goes to the pattern on the retina of the individual, and then he then writes something down into, let's say, English. He writes something down that he needs to give to the broadcaster on the radio. So pattern goes from radar to the retina to motor movements to the piece of paper that gets transmitted to the broadcaster. The broadcaster, the same pattern, then communicates that to the local town, and they receive that same pattern. But that same pattern is an implication for action. So now that they've received this pattern, they go and okay, we have to batten down the hatches. We got to make sure we have food. And but part of what I'm trying to hopefully illustrate that I think is associated with what you just said is this idea that there are patterns that maintain themselves across different forms and transmutations, but it's still the same thing, if that makes sense.
Let's put it this way. Our minds work best with patterns and stories. In a tribal village, let's take your village. Let's take your exact same example and let's remove technology. In a tribal village, the shaman sees a black cloud. What does that black cloud mean? Rain is coming. What does he do? He alerts the people. How does he alert the people? Do they have language yet? Or is it just a specific way that he yells? Or does he just point, hey, here? You see that? We know what that means. How do we know what that means? There's a subconscious pattern recognition in the human mind where we've learned how to communicate the patterns that we've recognized in a way to where everybody else understands it. That's what language is. That's the system that came from the human mind once you understood pattern recognition. So to me, language is a result of humans evolving their pattern recognition skill.
Right, right, absolutely. And it's more, I think, about how our bodies, our brains, and our minds are developed such that they can emit and receive those patterns. And so it's in our bodies. How do I say this? The same pattern is in our bodies too. Like it's not, and I don't think you were saying this, but it's not like the patterns are only abstract, right? It's not like the patterns are, God, the pattern like patterns transcend the subject object dichotomy. They transcend the abstract and the concrete, which is hopefully part of what I was trying to illustrate in my example. But what I think is also explicit or at least implicit in what you were just saying, right? Like the meaning of the black cloud makes it to the villagers through these different transformations, but it's the same meaning throughout. It,
And it's the same symbol that cued that throughout the system. And so what I'm saying is that archetypes are patterns. So the archetypes that we study are just patterns that humanity has recognized in in personified through people, places, and things. Language, words, names, labels. These are just patterns or archetypes defined, limited within a small space, right? So let's understand this. All of these archetypes work together or are part of the whole. So when you limit an archetype based off of that, so for instance, we see a dark cloud and we say it's going to rain. Every dark cloud doesn't mean it's going to rain. That dark cloud could pass over before it lets loose. See how the variation of the pattern here could confuse people. And so there's this idea here of how we interact with patterns and how we interact with these archetypes in a way of understanding how they're positioned. And that's what I do when I'm thinking. As I give the archetype space to be more than just what it presents itself as.
okay, I think I have a better understanding of how you think now. Can we move now into some practical application? And so you think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you think archetypically, you think abstractly, creatively in terms of patterns and forms, and you have this ability to transport yourself or to view the world in terms of different levels of analysis, and you are very practically and pragmatically goal oriented in how you do this thinking, right? And so you seem to see symbols, content, patterns, knowledge, and you aren't just randomly recategorizing these things. You have problems that you're trying to solve, and you ask yourself what would be the best way to categorize this set of knowledge to solve whatever this problem is that I'm trying to solve. Is that fair?
Yeah. So let's put it this way. If these archetypes are true in all things, right? And you have a problem and it has a certain amount of variables, you can then use an archetype that's built with that amount of variables to balance it. That's the concept here. So what I'm doing is I'm realizing that if I want to build something that is true, I need to build it in patterns that replicate natural things that exist and that exist throughout time. So patterns and archetypes exist without time, regardless of if the thing that I'm looking at that's displaying that pattern lives or dies. The pattern doesn't go away. Itself is eternal. And if I can build something that generates within that pattern, it will be eternal. So if I build a business that follows an archetype, and I understand the path of that archetype and how to grow it and how to change it, and when it shifts, I can build a business that is in line with nature. So in essence, what I've been attempting to do is to understand archetypal structures in a way and the natural patterns of the world in a way that allows me to build a business structure that flows with the natural rhythm of the universe.
Can I give you a psychological example and then you tell me if that illustrates what you're saying, and then I want to hear a business example after this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so one archetype is the devouring mother. The devouring mother is often represented by the serpent, the dragon, the reptilian sea creature that is chaotic and consumes everything. The devouring mother is also associated with the unknown because you can imagine that our ancient ancestors associated the depths of the water, the darkness, the place where there's no light, the place where you haven't been before, with predators. And one of our main predators was snakes. And so when you venture out into the unknown, one common experience is contention with something that will eat you or kill you or injure you. Okay. One psychological problem that people deal with all the time, and probably, like you said, have always dealt with, is dealing with anything unknown. That makes us anxious. And so, if you're going on a new date, if you're starting a new job, if you are joining the military, or you're moving to a new town, there are elements of those problems that are archetypal. And in this case, we're talking about the specific archetype of the devouring mother, of the unknown. And so, in a specific instance, let's say starting a new job, once you can recognize that part of that problem is archetypal, you then kind of already have part of the solution. Because in the world of the archetypes, the devouring mother is often contended with by the hero. And the hero, through our various archetypal expressions and various stories, acts a certain way. One of the things that the hero does is he voluntarily confronts chaos. And so the individual who's embarking on this new journey, starting this new job, one of the things that can help them in solving that problem is to have a mindset of voluntarily confronting this dragon. Now, that archetypal solution is not the full solution because it's a very general and abstract solution, right? You still have to navigate the peculiarities of this new job, but you at least aren't starting from scratch. Is that reminiscent of what you are saying in terms of how you are identifying these archetypal patterns and problems and solutions?
Dog, literally. So the concept here is that when I decided to get into shaman work, for me, what is a shaman? A shaman is someone that deals with the spirit realm. And so to me, I have made it a bit of my business intentionally, and it's a will thing. I've chosen to what I call face the darkness and pull out light. And so the concept here is that, like you said, there's an aspect of almost like a heroic thing here where it's like, I'm not really scared of doing this, and I seem to be pretty good at unpacking these things, so I should probably do it. There's that, and then there's this element of almost feeling like it's needed to be done. And I don't know what really cues it. I honestly think there's a bit of coding, like, and like I get into like ancestral coding, divine history, whatever you want to, however you want to kind of phrase it. But there's an aspect of my subconscious mind that is determined to unpack reality in a way that I can express it to help people. And it revolves me digging and diving into things that people consider taboo in order to do it. And that is kind of the way that kind of unfolded for me. It's like once I kind of started peeling the thing back on esoterics and things, and so I get into like some of my shroom experiences. I consider my deeper meditations a part of like communicating with spirit or communicating with myself or my inner self. And so during a lot of those journeys, there's this aspect of me having to close my eyes and wait for the things to kick in. And there's a visual of you almost walking into your mind and having to clean it out. There's this idea of like walking into like literally, and so this is just me kind of talking about trips. I don't really talk about this a lot, but I've been told to kind of get into it more and explain my experience with psychedelics. So my first like major trip, I was like, I've never seen things doing anything, and this was like, all right, you said that. Now let's see what you're gonna see. And so I was doing about mm, 5 to 7 grams of shrooms. And I was doing a meditation. I sat down, laid in my bed, binaural beats on, lights off, long meditation. So the shroom trip is usually about 6 hours. The first hour and a half is kind of more you waiting for things to kick in. And so in that space, there was a point where there was like an orb that appeared in my eye. Like my eyes are closed, but I see this thing floating off in the distance. It's a little circle, small ball. And as I get closer to it, I see all the old cartoons, junk food, and all of these things swirling around this nucleus as sorts. And I dive into it, and it unfolds to be that's the outer layer of my mind. For whatever reason, this is how my subconscious mind displayed these things. And so as I got into this experience, I started unpacking the different layers of my mind. I seen lust there, it was women and all of these things. And then there was just these different like so we went from outside to inside was lust, and then beyond that once I just relaxed and ignored that temptation, there was another layer. And so there's like you get ideas of walking through hell and all of these different things. You experience that in these moments, and somehow from that, in those experiences, and just really getting deeper into self, you begin to start having during meditation having these subtle nudges. I call them nudges from guardians, nudges from spirit, however you want to kind of do it. And so this is the side of metaphysics that becomes hard to communicate about, because it's like, well, how did you get to this? Well, you could argue I, but that state of mind allows me to process the reality in a way, in the process, the way things work in a way to allow me to do this. So how does this correlate to everything we're talking about? During my first big trip and at the end of this experience, it's like it breaks down your entire mind, and you watch these concepts form back in your mind. You watch yourself, you go from kind of just being like, oh, I'm high as fuck, to, oh, it's what's today? What's my name? Where am I at? Where am I going? Got it. And you come back into yourself. And so the first time I did it, I was like, wait, so if I just pay attention, I can watch my ego form. I can watch how I'm identifying myself with my environment. And that took me on a rabbit hole of thought and how the mind works, and psychology and sociology, and how we compare and understand things. So honestly, something in psychedelics cued me to begin to start this journey. And that would be the like beginning point of all of that.
Checks out. Eco dissolution, disintegration, precondition for a higher reintegration. It checks out.
It was like it's like unpacking myself there brought me into a version of myself that was like, look, bro, you've been here before. The soul is a thing. Like there's a lot of things that I get into belief wise that I just don't really communicate because it's just not worth trying to explain. But like yeah, like internally, like bro, I believe we've been here before. I believe the soul is internal. I believe you can connect your DNA to soul path. There's a whole packet of things to unpack. Like it's just not worth explaining because there's not enough like valuable proof to it. So it's like there's a lot of these concepts that I could get into that as we talk through things, I'll begin to speak on more. But
Mm-hmm.
that's really why I like kind of letting you drive a little more, because I want to kind of like see these. I want to take time to unpack the psychology side so I can identify the patterns of metaphysics and psychology, and you're trying to do the same. So us going back and forward is an interesting thing, as we build out these connectors and slowly start showing the reality for what it is.
No, absolutely agreed, man. There's a God. There's two paths we can go down. So we can start back with where what we initially talked about, which was you gave the example of how you made these associations, these archetypal associations between Venus and the 372s, which culminated in the generation of a calendar that a business owner could use to organize their daily tasks, essentially, right?
Basically.
So we could do another example, if you have another one, because that basically you explained how you used metaphysics to solve the problem of how the business owner could organize their daily tasks, which is useful. Like that's very helpful. One question I'm assuming many business owners ask when they're starting off, or one question many entrepreneurs face is like, what do I do? Where do I start? What do I
How do I
focus
figure
on?
out what my pattern is? How do I set myself on a rhythm that works well for business?
Right, right, exactly. So that to me, one, as a example, as an example, I felt like was very useful, but also being able to see how you think through that full cycle of metaphysics application. I think that's very helpful. So we could do one more of those if you have one of those, or we could dive deeper into the psychology of creativity and how you think, because I was very interested in that as well.
I really go into the psychology of how I think. The other example I had, I'll make it short. That way we can kind of get into both. So the other example is I had was I found the Wheel of Life. The Wheel of Life is a Buddhist. I found it as a Buddhist painting, and so this goes back into how my mind works. I seen the painting. I asked ChatGPT, "Hey, what does this mean?" Oh, this is the 12 cycles that humanity is normally stuck in. The ends of this circle represent the 12 archetypal patterns that humanity calls suffering. And this symbol is about you being able to zoom out enough to realize that the suffering that you're experiencing is an illusion, and that you're just looking too closely at a specific element in life. And so I built an application that allows you to pick each layer that you feel like you're stuck in, and then it gives you a reading on what that is telling you about how you're thinking and how to unbreak yourself out of that cycle. And so to me, that's another way of doing it is I like bringing in these metaphysical elements or these deeper teachings that already have a full system, and then automating it in a way that makes people more likely to even look at it. Because most people look at it and see a demon holding a circle and be like, but if you see an app which says pick bird, dog, or whatever, I forgot what it is, bird, pig, or owl, I believe is the three first option. No, bird, it's bird, snake, or pig. Sorry, I'm gonna stop acting like I don't pay attention to this stuff. It's just I'm gonna put it this way, and this is gonna bring us into the caveat of how I think. I am not a computer. It is not my job to remember everything exactly. It is my job to understand the systems that are at place and how it works. I'm trying to get closer to unity. So having every detail memorized is impossible because human has categorized too much shit. So I'm very good at remembering the concept. And that's why I think the way that I do. I remember the concept more than the details because if I know the concept and how it works well enough, I can always go pick up the details if I need it. Like I'm not like my mind doesn't like completely forget it, but I might. I've never been a spelling person. I don't do. I opted out of biology. If you want to ask me how to spell mitochondria, or bro, I know what it is. I know what it does. I know how it functions. I don't even really need to know how to spell it. I'll never even fucking see it. Like, what are we talking about? So, and that's where my mind is so weird because it's like I dance so fluently with information that it's kind of strange. Like I don't really and that goes into the creative aspect of it. So I'm very big on being creative. I dance is a very big element. Dance and movement is a very big element to how I think. I believe that a person's ability to move their body correlates to how stuck they are in thought. So for instance, I can do this because I know exactly which part of my body I'm moving and why. I'm patient enough to think that through. Most people don't have that peace of mind. So the aspect here is that dance gives me a way to work through my thoughts in a way that gives me a freedom in mind. The more free I am physically and movement wise, the more free I am thought wise. That's my correlation. I believe that the better you are at expressing yourself creatively, the better you are at thinking. And I looked up here, and there is this whole thing about creativity and intelligence. And so, like, when you look at how I can dance and how I can move, you can tell that, oh, this person doesn't think like the average person. Now, let's take this another layer. I believe in this concept that I call divine mannerisms. I believe people that are connected to spirit physically move a certain way. Watch how a crackhead moves, no offense. And then watch somebody that meditates and how their physical moves. How do they walk? How do their arms move? What are their gestures? How do they speak? What are the nuances there? How does a drunk person move compared to a sober person? These are the mannerisms and the spirits that you're connected to and how they display themselves. So people on drugs move a certain way because they're connected to a certain spirit. If you're connected to your spirit and it's balanced, you have control of thought, mind, body, and spirit. If you don't, you lose control of those things. This is how that plays out. And so a person's physical health and their physical ability to function correlates to their mental and spiritual health as well. And so that's the system of that's where I feel like creativity comes in because If you are physically fit, you can express your creativity at the highest level. And that gives the mind and the spirit solace. This is how we create balance in the ecosystem personally.
I have a client who is schizophrenic, psychotic more broadly, and she's bedridden. And when I go and talk to her, she is also talking with other people, primarily family members, but past people that she's experienced. And when I'm in the room with her, I imagine from her perspective, she's in a room full of people and then I'm there. And this one instance in particular, I started playing some disco music because she requested it, like 70s music. Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think that's 70s. I don't know. But like Earth, Wind, and Fire. And she started dancing. And I started dancing. And it was really fun. But she was also sharing the experience with the other people in the room. And they were dancing. And I couldn't help but speculate that what if those other people are not only images of, for example, her father, her sister, but they're components of her personality that have been externalized. And I wonder to what degree spirits are also like that. They're potential personalities that are a part of us but have split off. And so, in some sense, their connection to our minds have been loosened, but they're connected nevertheless, which is why we encounter them. I wonder if any of that resonates with you.
I believe spirits are archetypal energy that has congealed but it has no body to be expressed. And so it sits in what we call the fourth dimension, either waiting for a body or waiting for some natural phenomenon that can carry the energy that it encompasses.
Now, would the fourth dimension be associated with the collective unconscious?
I can associate basically yes. So idealistically here, so the third dimension is our physical reality. The fourth dimension is the buffer zone between us and our actual collective unconsciousness. So the fifth dimension is correlated to love. We go back to this number five again, see how it circles all back. And so we're back at the number five. Number five is associated with love. It's also associated with, so there's this concept here that you can't go from the fourth to fifth dimension without letting go of hate. So this is this idea of like God being all loving. There's this idea of understanding the allness here that's required to get through the fourth dimension. And so the concept here is that beings that can't accept the love get stuck in the fourth when they die or when they expire. So if your energy isn't balanced and you no longer have a physical form, this is what we know as the fourth dimension. This is the buffer zone. This is spirits. This is also where children come in and wait to be born. So this is like the buffer zone between heaven and earth, in essence. This is purgatory in layers. Like you think about how they say like heaven has multiple layers. This is like the layer before we get to the pearly gates. And there's a range from demons to babies depending on how close we are to heaven.
Okay, now zoning in into how you think, maybe using that just as an example, because
That's a great way to start because I jumped multiple concepts to explain that, and that's and that's really just how it works. Like I don't. There's no line there. There's at least three different concepts that I correlated to formulate that idea.
okay, so I want to pin down this notion of correlational thinking as well, because that's very helpful. I, at least for me, understanding that in part the mind and the brain is organized associatively, that's very helpful. So in psychology there's this understanding of cognition called connectionism or parallel distributed processing. Both of those terms are the same thing, and both of those are also just a remake of associationism, which is what we are discussing. Earlier I started talking about how you can imagine how in the average conversation in the English language, there are some words that are used more than others. Like you'll hear the, I, me, hey. Like, let's say the English language is comprised of 50,000 words. there's a minority of those words that are used very, very often. And so you would say that those words have stronger connections or higher associations compared to other words. The same thing is true at the level of letters, at the level of syllables, at the level of phrases, sentences, so on and so forth. You mentioned earlier the example of the villager, let's say the priest or the shaman or the medicine man seeing a black cloud, and somehow he built that association in his mind that a black cloud means rain sometimes, but the association is strong enough in his mind that it drives action, which is very interesting. How he built that association is the same question as how a child builds his or her associations to the world. And it's also a very similar question to how LLMs learn. And one of the things that's crucial, though, is that unlike many LLMs, human beings are not blank slates. And so our brains and our minds have inherited predispositions to form certain associations. And so
Mm.
it's not from scratch, you know. But still, given that we have these parameters, within those parameters, there's a wide range of potential associations that could be created. And again, like I said earlier, the more creative someone is, the more that they, for example, use words that most other people don't use. um, and another thing I wanted to say, going back to you, or I'll generalize it. One of the things that distinguishes creatives, merely creatives, from psychotics and people who have various psychopathological conditions is their bounding in their creativity with functionally acting in reality. And so you've mentioned that multiple times, how your focus, or at least one of your focuses, seems to be how do things work in reality, because you can make connections for the sake of making connections, but if there's no higher order governing principle, then you get a lot of false positives. Let's say that when you're making these various connections.
I'll put it this way. This was what really got me going and getting the idea structured well. The concept of us being able to bring heaven to earth. Heaven has been mapped by every culture that believes that we can do this. These maps show how heaven is organized based off the cultures that believe in heaven. If I study those maps, I can take heavenly concepts and structure earthly things. I have brought heaven to earth. That is what I work on.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of Carl Jung's students, Eric Neumann, he has written about how heaven through many cultures is masculine and earth through many cultures is feminine, and he made an association between what is essentially the patriarchy and heaven by discussing how for many cultures the specific culture is created by men. This set of expectations, the behaviors, the regulations, the religious ideas, the institutions, many of them are erected by men. And you can imagine that the culture, which again is the set of expectations, is also a map that gets passed on to future generations. And so one of the things that we do, again, there's a difference between masculinity and femininity and male and female, but I'm somewhat conflating them here. One of the things that we do in our current society is we learn from the maps of our ancestors, which is another way of just saying that we're trying to understand our culture. And you can think of heaven as that reservoir of endless knowledge. of adaptive maps that we can pull from to make things better in the here and now, which again could be thought of as Earth, and bringing those pieces of wisdom and those good maps down to Earth to work.
Even this way, like even so, I position it this way: cultures are epigenetics expressed in habit.
Yes.
We have created. So you think about cultures. Cultures tell you what to eat, where to go, how to hang out, how to communicate with other people. This is a survival book. It's nothing else. What colors to wear, where to like. It's a survival book. It's based off of where you're positioned. Your culture is your survival guide for your society. And your ability to understand where your culture is positioned in the society that you live in and navigate that is part of how you balance who you are. And
Yeah.
like you said, it does correlate to heaven and earth because so as above, so below, as within, so without. So as within, so without points to this idea that your internal workings, your epigenetics, your DNA, your internal intuition is the best way to understand the external. So as within, if you understand yourself, as without, so without, you'll understand what's outside of you as well. And if you understand what's outside of you well enough, you'll understand what's internal you as well. So it's really this understanding of once I begin to understand concepts like that, it's like, okay, so if I understand anything and I can find its opposite and what's to the left and right of that, I'm slowly building out this full system. And so I've just been trying to figure out what is the system actually? How does it operate? And that's why I always go back. I like 12. I like sevens. I like how can I compartmentalize? I like threes. If okay, the Holy Trinity. Why is it considered the Holy Trinity? Okay, well that's the first form. The first form in this reality starts in threes. So in order for anything to have a physical body, it has to have three parts.
The first form of this reality starts in threes. Is that what you said?
Yeah. The first physical form in this reality is a three. A dot doesn't have a form. A line doesn't have a form. A triangle is the first shape. This is all metaphysics and how metaphysicists think. And so when you look at the world from this way, you're not you begin to understand how the reality is structured. Like what's the code? So for me, numerology is the code of the world. Things are built from 1 to 9. Every other number is imaginary. It goes outside of the scope of things. 12 is arguable. 13, shit like that. You get into like 22 master numbers. There's other things that are like the outside of that. But if we're talking about like the structure of reality and how reality is built, it's from 0 to 9. Everything fits within one of those numbers.
The Trinity. Your ability to string concepts together and ideas greatly outpaces me, and so sometimes I have to just sit and like, okay, hold on, okay, hold on. And it's like I don't know if this is how it is phenomenologically for you, but for me, it's like a muscle. It's like I can tell when I'm well greased, for lack of a better term. I guess when I've slept well, when I've eaten right, when I'm hydrated, I can tell when the rate of association making is good or bad.
Certain information tunes you. I believe that. I believe that understanding information in a certain way tunes your mind to begin to work in a way that's progressive. I believe the way that we're taught to think is what keeps us from being able to do what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And so the way that we're taught to think keeps us from doing what you're doing. And what you are doing is like we've been talking about. Okay, that's okay. Maybe we could spend the last few minutes on that. That's something that I think would be helpful to flesh out. We kind of did it. We kind of discussed how you think in an explicit form. God, it's so complicated
I believe
because
people are too rigid with their definitions. The way that we learn in modern school keeps everything defined and positioned as this is what this is how it works. If you believe that for the rest of your life and you don't go outside of what you learn with a grade school education, you are dumb. Let's have a conversation. If you go with what they teach you in high school as the laws of the reality and how the entire world works, and you go to try to apply that in actual space, does it work?
so Okay, okay, okay. So this goes back to what Heraclitus called enantiodromia, which is what you just said, the tension of opposites. A thing moving in one direction or a thing tends towards its opposite, right? And the tension between a thing and its opposite is what the fundamental pattern of reality. I don't know. It's something key, but that principle of opposites is essential and something that Carl Jung took from Heraclitus that really was the foundational axiom of his whole analytical psychology. So one useful tension is the tension between order and chaos. Order means a lot of things, chaos means a lot of things. They are archetypal concepts. There's positive and negative elements to each of them. You just spoke about a potential pathology of too much order, which manifests in the form of overly rigid thinking.
Yep.
We also just spoke about what culture is, and this can be brought into contemporary issues as well. I guess a necessary component of culture is also the dialogue that revitalizes it. Because, look, things can go bad when people don't want to change their mind, when
Yep.
people are too rigid. Things also go bad when we do not have any set laws or expectations to govern behavior. If
Agreed.
if everything is always up for grabs and always undefined, that's horrible. Again, the same way that if we still operated today the same way we did 200 years ago, we probably wouldn't be here. You know, like we had to adapt, and so one of the things that I've been wrestling with is the relationship between the individual and culture, because it's the individual, it's the shaman, it's the magician who transforms culture in various ways. But I'm just going to say it simply like that. At the same time, culture is needed because culture is so protective, and like you said, it's the map, it's the set of expectations that enables me as I'm growing up, as I'm moving from childhood to adolescence. It gives me my role instead of me having to figure out. There's still some things I have to figure out, but instead of me having to figure things out from scratch, I just go to school. I just do what my friends do. I just listen to law enforcement. I listen to my parents, and at some point, you get to the stage where, like you're saying, I think this is where you're at. You can really step outside of a lot of this, and you can assess and see, where do we want to go? What is good? What are the
The shepherd to the sheep.
You can be the shepherd to the sheep, but one, again, to be a sheep is to be disciplined. It's to be able to listen to someone. It's to be able to follow rules and to follow expectations. But to remain a sheep is to be unable to question those expectations when they become outdated. And so it's like the sheep need the shepherd, but the shepherd need the sheep, and it's as if those are two roles that human beings have within us that we have to, at minimum, become aware of, and then maybe optimally learn how to step into and out of those roles. I don't think everyone should be a shepherd. I also don't think everyone
So
should be a sheep. You know?
the idea here is that we live in the churning. This is the concept you were getting on between the balance between chaos and order. This is the churning. I bring up this term a lot because it's this idea that the reality we live in is meant to do exactly what you're explaining. That's why you can't break out of that cycle. You have to dance with reality. What role are you playing? What position are you playing? In your position, what is it best for you to do? And so what we realize is that there are people that are awake. This is the whole enlightened concept here. So to be enlightened or to be immortal is just to be aware that this is all a game, a cycle, a sideshow. At the end of the day, it's creating energy. The whole point of all of this is for us to generate energy. We can make it fun or we can make it not fun. Regardless, energy is generated. And so I believe that there is a way to step out. I believe that certain people psychologically, physically, genetically are programmed to be able to step out of these cultures, these cycles, this association with ego, to help direct the system. Just like there are people, individuals that are able to do it to disrupt the system. And this is the line. And so the sheep aren't necessarily sheep. They're just people that haven't stepped outside of the system before. It's more of an information thing than anything. Imagine it like a body. There's white and red blood cells. These things have their roles. And then there's just regular fucking cells that are just there, not doing shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're just there. They're atoms. They're placements. They're a part of the system itself. They're a part of the churning. Some people call them NPCs. There's a large group of people here that aren't going to wake up, that aren't going to be aware of what's going on, that aren't aware of these patterns. And it's just a psychological, genetical, however you want to determine who gets the pick of the lot, or if you can take somebody out that isn't supposed to, or whatnot, or how that works, or if we can educate everybody to be aware enough so we can maybe move faster. These are the questions that I'm beginning to ask. Like, what is this system? How does it work? Can we manipulate it? Can we turn it on to make it more enjoyable? Is it like what is it knobs on this bitch? Like what the fuck is going on? Like, you know what I'm saying? That's where I'm at with it. Like, if we can identify everything that we've talked about over the last couple of conversations, there is a functioning system at play that somebody has figured out how to work. You know what I'm saying? And not only have they figured out how to work it, for generations they've been manipulating it for them and theirs. And that's what we consider the Illuminati. And then there's the side of people that are doing it to keep the reality balanced. Some people call it the white hat, black hats, angels, demons, vampires, werewolves, call it whatever you want to. There are people that step out, that live outside of the normal experience of life. I consider myself a shaman. That's why I take that title. I don't have to associate with reality. I've broken my ego enough. I've went mad enough in my mind that I don't associate with the system enough to play along unless I have to.
How do you? I can imagine someone becoming very either cynical or nihilistic through
It's a
having
choice.
that experience. It's a choice.
It's all about choice.
Why did what led you to your choice?
Would you rather be evil or good? Would you rather live or die? If those are your options and there's nothing else there, what do you choose?
Many people
So
choose
imagine
that.
psychedelics back me into a corner, and I have to ask myself, if I died now, would I be okay with that? And if I live now, what would I do to make my life worth it? What does that look like? How do you add value to the world? For whatever reason, these are the things that I contemplate because I have a fear of being inadequate. And so my adequacy revolves around me being a contribution to the grander scheme of this thing. That's just my mindset.
Let me play devil's advocate because I think we've talked about this before. There's one kind of pathological personality type that is highly intellectual but falls in love with its own intellect, and it
I
doesn't.
fight with that.
I do too. I do too. And it unless you have a higher order purpose or principle that tempers your intellect and puts it in its place, many people fall prey to this. And there's a great book by Dostoevsky called Notes from Underground. It's a 100-page novel, written in I think 1860s, and it follows someone, a bureaucrat, a Russian bureaucrat who is just hyper intellectual, like comes up with, 50 ideas a second and is so resentful because he feels that the average man is more of an action oriented person rather than an idea oriented person. And so the average man doesn't see the beauty in his ideas. And so he's just stuck with his mind without any ability to share it. And when he tries to share it, he does it in this arrogant way, like, how can you not understand how amazing this is, and I can see myself falling prey to that at times. But okay, sorry, the question was god, I forgot the question. uh I think I was trying to better understand how you don't become cynical or nihilistic, and then you brought up how there are only a few options. There's life and death, and there's, you mentioned another one,
Good and bad.
good and bad, good and evil, and yeah. So many people choose. Many people don't choose what you have chosen. You know,
I'll
many
put it
people
this way.
who have that, who have developed an awareness to your level, and a detachment, for lack of a better term, they adopt the frame of reference, for example, that, well, in a billion years none of this is going to matter anyway, so why give a fuck?
I have reverence for the being that designed this system. I'm impressed.
But there's a humility in that too.
I don't think I'm smarter than God, bro. Like once I've started figuring all this out, it was like, oh, if I think I don't figured out the keys and secrets to reality, that's ignorant because something had to design this. There's something sentient enough to put all of this in place.
It's,
I'm not smarter than God. And then so there's this other answer. And so it really comes from my Christian base. I grew up Christian. I still grew up Christian. I spent all my years in the church. My dad was an ordained minister. I grew up doing step and dance at the church. I sung in the choir, bro. I don't want to step. I've always told myself I'm not going to step too away from my roots. I want to look at all this information because I understand the toxic nature of some of the elements of how I was brought into religion, but I still do believe that there is a God, and I do believe that there's a higher order to things. I do believe that it's our job. So if if we are reflections of source, let me put it this way in a metaphysical terminology, so it resonates more to what I'm where I'm at now. If we are reflections of source, it is our job to experience this reality. So every experience I have is a gift to source directly. My sight, my feeling, all of my senses report back to source. It's my job to make sure that what is experienced is valuable. That's my mindset.
I think that's it, man. I think, okay, so earlier you mentioned the question of how to essentially speed up the balancing of chaos and order in our culture, or perhaps for all of humanity. I think that, I think in our culture right now, one of the things that is holding us back is our lack of a shared, unified narrative that
Agreed.
orients our culture. And you've brought this up before, actually, and I think I disagreed, but now maybe I have a better understanding. So you and I right now in this conversation, I think one of the reasons that our conversations, at least in my opinion, have been enjoyable and have been great is because our beliefs are organized hierarchically. Like I think X because I think Y because I think Z and so on, right? In our different belief hierarchies, they are the same at many high levels of analysis, at many of the high levels. And so it might be at like some specific details that we're like, but like there's so much of our beliefs and expectations of each other and of the world are aligned that there's just so much we don't have to talk about. Like you bring different concepts and associations and many things that I haven't heard of, but it would be so much more difficult for us to have conversations if I didn't believe in, let's say, the notion that reality is made up of patterns.
Hmm.
Like that idea is so crucial to, I think, how both of us think and how many of the thinkers that we listen to or have read think. And so because we have that one crucial idea in common, we don't have to spend time like explaining to each other the difference between form and content and patterns and archetypes. And so, okay, now bringing that to a cultural level, there's an element of disagreement within a culture that's healthy because it gets the dialogue going. But I think today we're too disparate. There's not enough alignment in the, let's say, archetypal zone of beliefs. such that it's creating an unnecessary friction in our progress.
Let's get back to what I said earlier. From 0 to 9. Too many complications, too much separation, it's impossible to balance. This is what I'm talking about here. Our cultures have so many subcultures that have subcultures that have subcultures that we can't even have a conversation. There's too much separation. Okay, I got dreads. Somebody that got a cut idea of hair is totally different from my idea of hair. But that doesn't separate us. But in society, dreadheads and the wave culture is two totally different cultures. It's two totally different group of niggas. They got their own mannerisms. They got their own habits. You got the dreads with you got niggas with dreads is doing bonnets now. The wave niggas got do rags. It's different. It's a whole. And now they have their expectations of personalities and all of this subtle subconscious bullshit that we just pile on top of each other. It's like, bro, like what do we can can we just talk without like now I got to deal with every individual stereotypal archetype, sub archetype in the room, and you got your inhibitions about this and that because you're associated or attached to this element of yourself, which is cool. I'm not tripping. Do your thing, but you should be able to step outside of that. And so, what I'm more so saying is that I believe people don't have a big enough awareness of their soul self. Like you have to be able to not be so attached to your ego self that we can have a conversation about what's actually going on outside of your archetypal perception of the thing and just really get into dealing with issues. Like I believe that the way my whole thing with against the narratives is that whatever you believe you are is a lie. Let's strip everything off. We need to strip everything off before we can have an honest conversation. And then let's add in the element of understanding patterns and archetypes so that we don't have to discuss every nuanced difference. Let's start setting up the systems to where we can identify things, and we're going to have to get it down to a certain amount of elements that we can actually quantify and pay attention to. And so here's another way of doing it. We can compartmentalize the reality. We can begin to have conversations and limit the amount of touch points and talking points in each conversation to make sure they get complete and valuable work done. And so more so what we're talking about is psychologically and mathematically, how do we have to work to make societies better? It has to be done in small nuggets.
Not only that, it, you brought up your Christian upbringing and God. I'm reading this book called Existence by Rollo May. These are psychologists and psychiatrists that have edited this book. And one of the things that they say is the phenomenological experience, that's redundant, sorry, but the phenomenology of time from the subjective perspective of humans is as follows. I'll just talk about the future. The future is like a horizon of potential. And what we do is we project out plans onto that horizon. And as we act, we hopefully bring those plans into fruition or into actualization. Another way that I hear what we're talking about right here is that if we project out different enough plans, we will just constantly get into each other's way and
Literally.
into conflict. And so the question becomes, what is the principle that optimally unifies all of our individual projected plans such that each person can do their own different thing to some degree to have their own little garden of Eden and personal freedom while not infringing on the social harmony. And that those are tight constraints, right? Like how is it that you do whatever it is that you want to do and I do whatever it is I want to do, but at the same time we're not getting in each other's way, and at the same time we can do this peacefully and productively, even if we're competing with each other, right? Because again, like in this dialogue, if there are points where I'm confused or if we disagree, there's still a creative and meaningful element that can emerge from conflict. So I'm not trying to disparage conflict and say that everything needs to be peaceful and orderly. We've talked about that before. Again, so I think that the unifying, how do I say this? One way to think of God, I think, is as that unifying principle that enables everyone to optimally plan for the future and act harmoniously in the present.
So let's get into that. I want to stop you right there because you just tied everything to where like look, watch. So the question is, this is me tying things back together again. So if God is that touch point, right? And earlier I brought together the idea of the 4D, 5D thing, and how in order for you to move into the 5D, you need love, right? So the uniting principle here is love. It's agape love. This is what the Bible is talking about. This is what Buddhist is talking about. It's all about love. This is the answer here. And so the question is, how does that work? So if you have unconditional love, you are empathetic enough for the person that you don't agree with to give them to space to grow. So the problem is that we misunderstand love because we've tried to love to lust. So we associate love with lust, and so we don't properly understand agape love, which is how we work communally.
That's it, man. That's it. And I've heard Jordan Peterson say this a lot, and I agree with it. Truth serves love. So I agree with you. I agree that love, again, God is supposed to be everything, right? And so God is supposedly ineffable, so human beings can't fully comprehend or understand God. And I think that's a reasonable way of thinking about it. It keeps you humble. Again, if God is the source of all things, go for it.
So the important thing here is realizing, okay, so in order for us to get from the fourth to the fifth is considered heaven, right? So in order to get in the realm of God, you have to embrace love fully. This is the concept here. And so what I like doing is this is how I unpack the metaphysical thing. So like in order for us to get into heaven, in order for us to bring heaven to earth, all humanity has to understand and love at a certain level. This is the resonance here. So the angels sing holy, holy, holy. What does that mean? They're in unison with love around God. They're expressing the same thing through their actions, vocal, whatever you want to sum up that metaphor. But in order to be close to God, you have to sing holy. You have to sing love. You have to express your desire to be loved.
Dog.
And so there's this concept here that the reason why society is so disjointed is because we don't believe in love or we don't understand it.
I would love to talk about this in the next podcast. I
We
think
can get into it.
I want to take a week or so and spend some time fleshing out what love is, the nature of love, because like I, I think yeah, I think that'd be very helpful to flesh out what love is, what love is like conceptually, what does it look like in action, what does it look like in business, in marriages, in family. How do animals show love? Like I feel like man's best friend. Man, I just lost my dog a few months ago, man, and like there is a love there. Even if it's no, I'm not gonna say that. There's a love there, and so there's so much we can learn from animals about love as well. And the last thing that I kind of want to say is I think that we might disagree on the lack of love that we are experiencing in our culture, although we might not disagree. For example, I think that you mentioned how we've turned love into lust in some senses, and so that's one way we're lacking in love, by kind of corrupting it. I think that one way we've corrupted love is by reducing it to compassion, and so we have to be nothing but compassionate to everyone, and that's how we show love. It's like, all right, come on now. So I think fleshing out love would be very helpful.
And so what we're really both what you just said there, and I think that what you we think we disagree, we will agree because I believe we don't practice holistic love. I believe people practice situational love. You see what I'm saying? If you do this, if you act like this, if this is like this, then I love it. And if it's not like that, then I probably don't like it or I hate it, depending on how I feel about it. And so the idea here is that if you see God in everything and everything is God, then you should love everything because you are God and you're an expression of that. So if you hate anything else, you hate yourself. That's why I think fighting somebody is stupid. I enjoy fighting. I think it's a physical, fun activity. But to fight somebody because you hate them and want to kill them is psychotic to me because I understand that we're all reflections of self. So I shouldn't want to kill myself. It just doesn't make sense. So war, all of these things eliminate themselves once you begin to live in an actual state of agape love because certain things just become psychotic. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we? Why? Doesn't make sense. There's no justifying. There's no way to justify certain actions if you practice love. It's just no. Why? What if you love animals and you love nature? There's certain shit you're just not doing. You're not gonna waste shit. You're gonna make sure that you get everything out of something. If something dies, you might pick it up and eat it, but you're not gonna like go kill the new baby that just like, why would you do that? Like that's just no. There's certain lines we don't cross when we practice love. You see what I'm saying? And love is just the word that we're using for this resonance of life. You see what I'm saying? And so that's really what we begin to understand is even when unpacking that, well, why is the word love? I don't know, but there's probably some reason for that. What's the etymology of the word love? What do the letters mean? What's the math? Like, how does it fit into our subconscious mind? All of these things work in a certain way.
That's okay. Yeah. The imagery of love. Why do we the symbols and
Heart.
imagery of love exactly? Why?
Why is it
Why
red?
yeah,
You see what I'm
Cupid,
saying?
Cupid, what's going on
Cupid is
here?
representative of the cherub. Cherub. What is the cherub? Who are they? What are those beings like? What is the actual meaning behind that being that's there? That's a whole other thing to unpack. But yeah, there's things there. Like what is that? Who is the cherub trying to convince them? Who is Chuck Cupid trying to convince to be married? Who is the original purpose of the arrow for?
All right, man.
I just had a whole other idea of something I have to go look and unpack now because now I had it. That's how my mind works. Now I'm like, okay, so this is a side note. This is how my mind works. Cupid, arrow. Who is the original arrow for? I'm thinking, now this is a big shoot to the left. Lyran Draconian War. So we're talking about the beginning, the mythology of how the seed races for humanity. The idea here is that in this frame of thinking, they believe that Earth is the physical contract for two alien species. The species are the Lyrans, which are lion-based beings, which we all the lion iconography that we have, and dragons, which we know as the reptilians. The idea here is that they had a war that destroyed the Lyrans planet originally, and that they had to have that there was a wedding here where a Lyran princess and a Draconian prince married and had children, and we in the results of that marriage. And so us ascending off planet or becoming interstellar or reaching enlightenment is the confirmation of this contract and the end of a universal war and a galactic war. That's the mythology here. My question is does that mythology include a story of a cherubim setting up the marriage? I'm gonna go look now.
I think that is a perfect example of how you think. And it's crazy how these conversations work, how they typically, I don't know if it's typical, but often they end where they started.
Yep.
What's going on there? No, I don't want to get into that. But no.
It's so what it is it's a resonance thing. Understanding that we have an intention to convey a certain energy here. And in the midst of that energy, we also have an intention to make sure that our points are understood and that they're well displayed. So we have a habit of not straying too far away from the initial nucleus and kind of circling this idea. And because we both, like you said, are aware of patterns, we're aware of when we're straying too far from the idea that we're supposed to be expressing and we circle back.
the
We're just smart, bro.
the golden thread, is that what it's called? The path, yeah, the path of enlightenment. No, that's it. And the wheel of Buddhism, right? The circle. No,
Yep.
it's all coming together. Okay, all right. I gotta end it, man. This was
I'm gonna
a
say
good one.
I had a hard stop at 7:30, so this is a good stopping point.
Dope, dope. Okay, next time, love as a
Love.
unifying higher order principle, and not just love, but like you said, holistic love.
the terminology that's used in metaphysics for this type of love that's needed is agape love. It's an African term, so we understand where the culture started and how long this concept has been around. It's basically means unconditional love,
Mm-hmm. All right.
and that's the concept that's the unifying factor. That's always been the unifying factor. No matter where you look, what culture, how you look at love, unconditional love, agape love specifically is the terminology that's used, and it's this concept that understanding and it's a mixture of empathy. It's a mixture of chaos and order. It's a mixture of understanding people, but not accepting it as something that you have to embody yourself. It's loving yourself enough to appreciate others.
Bro, you keep saying things that it's like, bro, we can unpack that. Okay, we gotta listen back to the past 20 minutes, and then we will
Definitely.
unpack all of those things because I so much of what you said, I agree with it. Um, we need, and then we will unpack a lot of that in another 2 hour session, which I think might not even be enough, but
We'll
excellent.
start working on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no, hey man, I appreciate you. Great talk.
Definitely appreciate you too as well, dog. Appreciate the talk. Appreciate the time.
Yeah,
Sorry
man.
I've been a little inconsistent these last couple weeks, but I'm back in. I'm locked in.
Yeah, man. We're locking in. All right, man. You have a good night.
Peace. You too.